The door shuddered under 3 violent blows. Marcus Kane's hand froze halfway to his whiskey glass. Outside, Hurricane Elise screamed like something dying. Then came the voice, raw, breaking, desperate.
Please, oh God, please open the door. My baby isn't breathing.
Ranger's head shot up, ears rigid. Another crash against the wood.
Please, she's turning blue. Somebody help us.
Marcus moved before his mind caught up. 20 years of Marine Corps instinct overrode 6 years of self-imposed isolation. When he yanked open the door, the wind punched him backward. But it wasn't the hurricane that stopped his heart. It was the infant in the woman's arms, lips the color of death. Before we continue, if you believe in the power of hope and second chances, hit that subscribe button right now. Stay with us until the end of this journey. You won't believe where it leads. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories of faith and courage travel across this great country of ours. Inside, now! Marcus's voice cut through the chaos with parade ground authority. The woman stumbled over the threshold, water streaming from her clothes, her hair plastered to a face drained of all color. Behind her, 3 more children materialized from the storm. 2 small boys clinging to each other, and a girl, maybe 7 or 8, eyes too sharp, too knowing for childhood. Marcus slammed the door against the wind. His prosthetic legs screamed where the socket pressed against scar tissue, but he ignored it. Ignored everything except the limp baby in the woman's arms. How long has she been like this? He was already moving toward the wood stove, already calculating core temperature, response time, survivability.
Maybe 10 minutes? 15?
The woman's voice cracked.
We were in the water. So much water. I tried to keep her head up, but the waves...
Give her to me. No, I can't. Ma'am. Marcus met her eyes. I'm a combat medic. Let me help your daughter. Something in his tone, not harsh but unshakable, broke through her panic. She handed over the baby with trembling arms. The infant was frighteningly light, her skin waxy, lips blue-tinged. Marcus laid her on the rug near the stove and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Pulse present but thready, breathing shallow. Classic hypothermia presentation. Ranger, blankets, now! The Belgian Malinois shot across the room to the trunk by the stairs, nosing it open with practiced efficiency. He returned, dragging wool blankets in his teeth. Good boy. Marcus stripped the baby's soaked clothing with swift, careful movements. The woman made a sound. Protest or despair, he couldn't tell.
Her name's Grace, she whispered. She's 11 months old.
Grace is going to be fine. Marcus wrapped the baby in dry wool, then pulled her against his chest using his own body heat. But I need you to get those other kids out of wet clothes. There's dry things in the bedroom, second door on the left. Move fast. The woman nodded, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The older girl caught her mother's arm.
Mama, I can do it. You stay with Grace. Emma, honey, I can do it.
The girl's voice held steel wrapped in velvet.
Come on, Noah, Liam. We need to get dry.
She herded the 2 boys toward the bedroom with an efficiency that made Marcus's chest tight. That wasn't normal childhood competence. That was survival adaptation. He'd seen it in refugee kids in Afghanistan, children who'd grown up too fast because someone had to. Your daughter's got a good head on her shoulders, he said, feeling the baby's breathing deepen slightly against his chest. She's had to. The woman sank onto the floor beside him, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't control them.
She's had to be too much, too soon.
Marcus glanced at her properly for the first time, mid-30s maybe, though exhaustion carved her features into something older. Her eyes were hazel, currently glazed with shock. ringed with the kind of dark circles that spoke of weeks without real sleep. When she pushed her wet hair back from her face, he saw the pale line where a wedding ring used to be. Grace stirred against his chest, a tiny whimper escaping her blue-tinged lips. "That's good," Marcus said quietly. "That's real good, Grace. You stay with us now, you hear?"
Will she?
The woman couldn't finish. "Her core temp is coming up. Color's improving, see?" He tilted the baby slightly so the woman could see the faint pink returning to Grace's cheeks. "Another few minutes and she'll be fussing for food." A sob broke from the woman's throat. Relief, gratitude, exhaustion all tangled together. She covered her face with her hands.
"I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go. I saw your light, and I just—"
"Stop." Marcus kept his voice gentle but firm. "You did the right thing. You got your kids to safety."
"Safety?"
She laughed, a bitter, broken sound.
"I don't even know what that means anymore."
Ranger moved closer, pressing his warm bulk against her side. She startled, then slowly reached out to touch his fur with shaking fingers. "He won't hurt you," Marcus said. "He's a service dog, trained to help people in distress."
"He's beautiful."
Her voice steadied slightly as she stroked Ranger's coat.
"What's his name?"
"Ranger."
"Military?"
"Yeah, we both are." "Were." Marcus felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. "Medically retired." She nodded slowly, and he saw understanding flicker in her eyes. The kind of understanding that came from proximity to the military world, its language, its losses. Emma emerged from the bedroom, shepherding the two boys. All three wore clothes far too large, Marcus's old sweatshirts hanging to their knees, sweatpants rolled up multiple times. But they were dry.
"Good job, kiddo," Marcus said.
Emma's shoulders straightened slightly at the praise, but her eyes remained wary, assessing. "The boys need food, and Mama needs to change too." "Emma," the woman started.
"Mama, you're shivering."
Emma's voice cracked slightly, the adult facade slipping.
"Please."
Marcus caught the dynamic instantly. The daughter parenting the mother. Classic role reversal. Another red flag his combat experience had taught him to recognize. "She's right," he said quietly. "There's women's clothes in there too. Belonged to... They'll fit." The woman looked at him, questions in her eyes, but she didn't ask, just nodded and disappeared into the bedroom. The two boys stood frozen, clinging to each other. Identical faces, though one had a dusting of freckles across his nose. 5, maybe 6 years old, both staring at Marcus with huge, terrified eyes. "You guys like hot chocolate?" Marcus asked. No response, not even a blink.
"They don't talk much,"
Emma said quietly.
"Not since Daddy died."
The words landed like shrapnel. Marcus looked at Emma, really looked, and saw the exhaustion carved into her young face. Saw the way she positioned herself between him and her brothers. Saw the responsibility pressing down on shoulders too small to carry it. "I'm sorry about your daddy," he said. Emma's jaw tightened.
"It was 8 months ago. Everybody says sorry."
Doesn't make it less true. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. A recognition passing between two soldiers who'd both seen too much. Grace began to whimper more insistently against Marcus's chest. He adjusted her gently, feeling her tiny fists curl against his shirt.
"She's hungry," Emma said. "She hasn't eaten since this morning."
"Does she take formula or—"
"Formula, but it's in the car. Everything's in the car."
Emma's voice wavered.
"The car that's probably underwater now."
Marcus stood carefully, cradling Grace. His prosthetic protested, but he ignored it. I've got powdered formula, military ration packs. They're designed for exactly this kind of situation. He moved to the kitchen area, one hand supporting Grace, the other pulling open cabinets. Ranger stayed with the children, his presence calm and steady. Emma, can you help me here? The girl approached cautiously. Marcus handed her a packet. Mix this with warm water, not hot, just warm. Use that kettle there. Emma took the packet, reading the instructions with fierce concentration. Her hands shook slightly, but she followed the directions exactly. You're doing great, Marcus said.
I have to.
Her voice was barely audible.
Mama tries, but she's so tired all the time. And Grammy Morrison says.
She stopped abruptly, eyes widening in fear. Says what? Emma shook her head violently.
Nothing. I shouldn't have said anything.
Marcus filed that away. Morrison, the same last name he'd heard in the woman's voice when she'd mentioned debts and in-laws and losing everything. But before he could press, the woman emerged from the bedroom. She wore jeans that were slightly too short and a faded Marine Corps sweatshirt that hung loose on her frame. Her wet hair was pulled back, revealing a face that might have been pretty before exhaustion carved it hollow. But her eyes, those hazel eyes now fixed on Grace with desperate intensity, those held something unbreakable. She's doing better, Marcus said. Breathing's good, color's almost normal. The woman crossed the room in 3 strides and took Grace from his arms, pressing her face into the baby's hair, breathing her in like oxygen.
Thank you,
she whispered.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Emma's making her a bottle.
Emma always...
The woman's voice broke.
Emma always takes care of everything.
Emma brought the bottle over, and they settled onto the old sofa. The woman, Marcus still didn't know her name, fed Grace with practiced movements, tears streaming silently down her face as the baby drank. The 2 boys remained frozen by the door, watching everything with huge, hollow eyes. Marcus recognized that look. He'd seen it on the faces of children in war zones, kids who'd learned that staying still and quiet meant staying alive. Ranger moved toward them slowly, carefully. He sat down about 3 feet away, close enough to offer comfort, far enough not to threaten. Then he laid down, resting his chin on his paws, and simply waited. Minutes passed. Then, so slowly Marcus almost missed it, the boy with freckles reached out one small hand and touched Ranger's fur. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. Soft. Safe. The other twin moved closer. Soon, both boys were sitting on either side of Ranger, hands buried in his thick coat, their breathing gradually slowing from panic to something almost normal.
He's good with kids,
the woman said softly, watching them. He's good with people who need him, Marcus replied. That's what he was trained for.
And you? Were you trained for this too?
Marcus met her eyes. Combat medic. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Ranger and I worked together on the last one.
Until
an IED took my leg and most of my team. The words came out flat, emotionless. He'd said them so many times they'd lost all meaning. Ranger got injured too, shrapnel in his shoulder. They retired us both. The woman studied him for a long moment.
How long ago?
6 years.
And you've been here alone since then?
Yeah.
That's a long time to be alone.
It's what I deserved. The words escaped before Marcus could stop them. The woman's expression shifted, not pity, but recognition.
I know that feeling, she said quietly. That feeling that you should have been able to save them.
That somehow their dying was your fault, even though you know, logically, that it wasn't. Marcus's throat tightened. Your husband?
Training accident, Camp Lejeune, 8 months ago.
She looked down at Grace, who had finished the bottle and was starting to drift off.
He was a Marine Corps captain. Best man I ever knew. And then one day I got 2 officers at my door with words I couldn't process and a flag I couldn't hold because I was 7 months pregnant with Grace.
I'm sorry.
Everybody's sorry. She echoed Emma's earlier words. But sorry doesn't bring him back, and it doesn't stop his parents from trying to take my babies away.
The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Excuse me? The woman's jaw set.
We weren't just running from the hurricane. We were running from Jake's parents, the Morrisons. They filed for emergency custody 2 weeks ago.
Marcus's combat instincts flared. On what grounds?
On the grounds that I'm an unfit mother.
Her voice went cold.
Too depressed, too poor, too low class, too everything that wasn't good enough for their son when I married him, and definitely not good enough to raise his children.
Emma had gone rigid on the sofa, listening. The twins pressed closer to Ranger.
They hired a lawyer, a good one, expensive. The kind you get when you own half the county and know every judge by their first name.
The woman's hands shook as she held Grace.
I had a hearing scheduled, day after tomorrow. But the hurricane, the evacuation orders. I had to choose between making the hearing or getting my kids to safety.
So you ran.
I ran.
She met his eyes, defiant.
I packed everything we could carry into Jake's old SUV, and I drove. I was trying to reach my sister in South Carolina, somewhere the Morrisons couldn't find us. Somewhere I'd have time to figure out how to fight back.
What happened to your car?
Bridge flooded. Water came up so fast, the whole road just disappeared. I tried to turn around, but the current...
Her breathing quickened.
The car started to sink. I got the kids out, but everything else, all our clothes, documents, everything, it's gone.
Marcus processed this, his mind cataloging problems and solutions the way he'd been trained. You said you had a hearing day after tomorrow?
Had. Past tense.
The woman's voice went hollow.
I missed it to run, which means I'm now in contempt of court, which means when they find me, and they will find me, I won't just lose custody. I'll lose it permanently. No.
Emma's voice cracked through the room.
No, they can't take us. Mama, they can't.
The woman pulled Emma close with one arm, Grace cradled in the other.
Baby, I'm going to fight with everything I have. But you just said... I know what I said. But I also know that I would rather die than let them take you away from me.
The twins started crying, silent tears streaming down their faces. Ranger shifted, pressing against them harder, offering what comfort a dog could give. Marcus watched this shattered family holding each other together with nothing but will and desperation, and something in his chest, something he'd thought dead for 6 years, cracked open. What's your name? He asked quietly. The woman looked up.
Rachel Morrison.
Marcus Kane, Staff Sergeant, retired. He crouched down so he was eye level with her. Rachel, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail. The lawyers, the judge, the case they're building, all of it.
Why?
Because I'm going to help you. Rachel laughed, bitter and broken.
You can't. You don't understand the kind of power these people have. Jake's father was a state senator. His mother's family founded half the county. They have money, connections, lawyers who win impossible cases. What am I supposed to fight them with?
Marcus held her gaze. You're supposed to fight them with me.
You don't even know us.
I know enough. He gestured to Emma, exhausted but still alert. I know your daughter's been forced to grow up too fast because she's trying to hold your family together. I know your sons have stopped speaking because they're too traumatized to find words. I know you walked your baby through a hurricane because you'd rather face nature's fury than let your in-laws steal your children. And I know, his voice dropped, raw with emotion he'd buried for years. I know what it feels like to lose everyone you love and spend every day after wondering why you survived when they didn't. Rachel's eyes filled. Marcus, I lost my wife and son 6 years ago. Car accident. I was deployed when it happened. Didn't even get to say goodbye. The words tore out of him, words he'd never said to anyone. I came home to an empty house and a flag ceremony, and 6 years of wondering what the point of survival was. So don't tell me I don't understand. I understand better than you know. Silence settled over the room, broken only by the howling wind outside and Grace's soft breathing.
Why would you help us?
Rachel whispered finally.
Why would you risk getting involved in something this complicated?
Marcus thought of Eleanor's smile, of 3-year-old William's laugh, of the empty house he'd lived in like a ghost for 6 years, going through the motions of existence without ever really living. Because, he said quietly, I think maybe you knocked on my door for a reason. And maybe I opened it for a reason. And maybe we both need to stop running from the things that scare us and start fighting for the things that matter. Emma was watching him with those 2 old eyes.
Do you mean it? You'll really help us?
I mean it.
Even if it's dangerous? Even if the Morrisons try to hurt you too?
Marcus met the child's gaze. Emma, I'm a United States Marine. I've faced Taliban fighters, IEDs, and enemy fire. A couple of rich people with lawyers don't scare me. For the first time since they'd arrived, Emma smiled. Small, tentative, but real. Outside, the hurricane raged harder. Inside, something new began to take shape. Fragile, uncertain, but undeniably present. Not quite family. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the beginning of one. Rachel shifted Grace in her arms. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, Marcus said. Tell me everything, and we'll figure it out together. And as the storm screamed around them, as Ranger kept watch and the children slowly relaxed into something almost like safety, Rachel Morrison began to talk. She told him about Jake, the man she'd loved, the father he'd been, the son who'd never quite fit his parents' expectations. She told him about the Morrisons' cold reception at the wedding, their barely concealed contempt for the girl from the wrong side of the county who'd trapped their son. She told him about Jake's deployments, his struggles with PTSD that his parents denied, his death that they somehow blamed on her. She told him about the months after, the grief and the bills and the Morrison machine slowly grinding her down. The therapists they'd hired who wrote reports labeling her depressed, the social workers who showed up unannounced, the quiet threats wrapped in false concern. And Marcus listened, his Marine Corps training cataloging every detail, every name, every tactical advantage and vulnerability. Because he meant what he'd said. He was going to help this family, and he was going to make damn sure the Morrisons learned what happened when you threatened a Marine's mission, even if that mission was protecting 4 people he'd met 3 hours ago. Even if that mission might be the thing that finally gave his life meaning again. Outside, Hurricane Elise continued her assault on the Georgia coast. Inside the lighthouse keeper's cottage, A broken Marine and a desperate mother began to build something that looked remarkably like hope. Neither of them knew it yet, but that storm had delivered exactly what they both needed. Each other. Rachel's voice had gone hoarse by the time she finished. Marcus sat across from her, elbows on his knees, absorbing every word like intelligence briefing from a hostile zone.
"The hearing's at 9 a.m., day after tomorrow," Rachel said. "Judge Patricia Hendricks. She went to college with Margaret Morrison, that's Jake's mother. They're in the same country club, same church, same everything."
So the deck's stacked.
"The deck's not just stacked, it's rigged, dealt, and playing itself."
Rachel adjusted Grace in her arms. The baby had finally fallen asleep, tiny fingers curled against her mother's collarbone.
"I had a lawyer, public defender. Nice guy, completely overwhelmed.
He told me last week that unless I could prove the Morrisons were unfit, actually prove it with evidence, we'd lose. And you don't have evidence. How do you prove someone's unfit when they've never actually raised the children?" Rachel's voice cracked.
"They see Emma and the boys maybe twice a year. Christmas and Jake's birthday. They send checks instead of showing up. But in court, they'll be the grieving grandparents who just want to honor their dead son's memory."
Marcus's jaw tightened. "What about Jake? Did he leave anything? Will, letters, anything that showed what he wanted?"
"He didn't have a will. We were supposed to do that after Grace was born, but then—"
She stopped, swallowing hard.
"And his letters home were all destroyed in a fire last year. The storage unit where I kept them. Electrical fire, they said. Though now I wonder."
"You think the Morrisons—"
"I don't know what to think anymore."
Rachel looked at Emma, who'd fallen asleep sitting up, her head tilted at an angle that would leave her neck sore.
"All I know is that every time I turn around, another piece of evidence disappears. Another door closes. Another person who is supposed to help me suddenly can't."
The wind screamed harder against the cottage walls. Something metallic clanged outside, probably the old weather vane on the lighthouse itself. Marcus stood, moving to the window. "Storm's getting worse. We're going to lose power soon."
"We have power?"
"Generator, but it's running on fumes. I've got maybe 6 hours of fuel left, and with the roads flooded—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Rachel understood. They were trapped. Isolated. No power, limited supplies, and somewhere out there the Morrison family's legal machine was grinding forward whether or not she was present to fight it. "I should let you sleep," Marcus said. "Bedroom's through there. I'll take the couch."
"I can't take your bed."
"You can, and you will. Kids need proper rest." His tone allowed no argument. "I've slept in worse places." Rachel wanted to protest, but exhaustion pulled at her like undertow.
"What about you?"
"I don't sleep much anyway." Something in the way he said it, flat, matter of fact, told Rachel this wasn't just insomnia. This was something darker.
"The nightmares?"
she asked quietly. Marcus's shoulders tensed. "Yeah."
"Jake had them too. After a second deployment. He'd wake up swinging, shouting orders in Pashto."
She paused.
"He never talked about it. Not really. But I learned to sleep light. Learned when to wake him and when to just wait it out."
"Rachel."
"I'm not comparing tragedies. I'm just saying I understand. A little."
She shifted Grace carefully.
"And I'm saying you don't have to pretend you're fine. Not with me."
Marcus turned from the window. In the firelight, the scar along his jaw stood out stark and white. "I'm not fine. Haven't been fine in 6 years, but I'm functional. That's enough." "Is it?" "Has to be." They stood in silence, two people carrying impossible weight,
recognizing the burden in each other even if they couldn't name it. Then Ranger's head shot up. His ears swiveled toward the door, body going rigid. Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, toward where his service weapon would have been if he'd carried one anymore. "What is it, boy?" Ranger growled, low and sustained. Not aggressive. Warning. "Someone's outside," Marcus said. Rachel's breath caught. "The Morrisons? Already? How could they stay with the kids?" Marcus grabbed a flashlight from the shelf, moving toward the door with surprising grace despite the prosthetic. "Ranger, heel!" The dog obeyed instantly, positioning himself between Marcus and the door. Marcus yanked it open. Wind and rain slammed into him, but he held steady, flashlight cutting through the darkness. A figure stumbled into the beam. Not a Morrison. Sheriff Tom Brennan, soaked through, bleeding from a cut above his eye. "Jesus, Tom." Marcus pulled him inside. "What the hell happened?" "Bridge collapsed. Not the main one. The service road behind the station." Brennan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. He was 53, built like a man who'd worked physical jobs his whole life, with a weathered face and hands scarred from decades of hard living. "Tried to drive through. Stupid. Truck went into the water. Had to swim for it." Rachel appeared with towels. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "It's a head wound," Marcus said. "Sit down before you pass out." Brennan sat heavily at the kitchen table. Rachel pressed a clean towel to his forehead while Marcus checked his pupils. "No concussion," Marcus said. "You got lucky." "Don't feel lucky." Brennan winced. "I came to warn you. Should have come sooner, but the storm, everything happened so fast." "Warn me about what?" Brennan's eyes shifted to Rachel. "The Morrisons, they've escalated." Rachel's hands stilled on the towel. "What does that mean?" "Means they got a judge to issue an emergency custody order. Not Hendricks, she wasn't available. They forum shopped until they found Judge Carson in the next county, old buddy of Richard Morrison's from the state senate days." "That's not legal," Rachel said. "You can't forum shop custody cases." "You can if you've got enough money and connections." Brennan's voice was grim. "Carson signed the order at 11 this morning, gave the Morrisons emergency temporary custody on the grounds that you'd fled with the children during a mandatory evacuation." "That's insane. Everyone evacuated." "Doesn't matter. They're calling it parental kidnapping. They've got law enforcement authority to remove the children on site." Brennan looked at Marcus. "I came because I wanted you to know what's coming. Soon as this storm clears, they'll have deputies up here with that order." Rachel's legs gave out. She sat down hard, the towel falling from her shaking hands. No, they can't. There has to be. We have rights. Due process, something." "You had due process," Brennan said quietly. "You missed your hearing. From the court's perspective, you ran." "To save my children from a hurricane." "I know that. You know that. Hell, even Carson probably knows that. But the Morrisons have expensive lawyers spinning a different story, and right now, their story's the only one being heard." Emma had woken up during the commotion. She stood in the doorway, face white, eyes huge. "Where are they going to take us?" Rachel crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling Emma close. "No, baby. No one's taking you." "But the sheriff just said—" "I don't care what the sheriff said." Rachel's voice shook with fury and fear. "I don't care what some judge signed. You are my daughter. Noah and Liam are my sons. Grace is my baby, and I will die before I let them take you away from me." "Rachel," Brennan started. "No." She whirled on him. "Don't tell me to be reasonable or calm down or cooperate. These people took my husband's death and turned it into a weapon against me. They've spent 8 months systematically destroying everything I have. And now they want my children? Her voice rose. Over my dead body. Ranger moved closer to Emma, pressing against her legs. The girl buried her fingers in his fur, breathing hard. Marcus had been silent through the exchange, but now he spoke.
Tom, how much time do we have?
24 hours. Maybe 36 if the roads stay flooded. But the storm's supposed to break by tomorrow afternoon. Brennan pulled out his phone, miraculously still working despite the swim. I'm risking my job telling you this, but I've known Jake Morrison since he was 16. Watched him join up, watched him become a good man despite his parents. And I know he wouldn't want this.
Do you have proof of that? Marcus asked.
What? Proof that Jake wouldn't want his parents to have custody? Letters, recordings, anything?
Brennan shook his head. Jake never said anything to me directly, but everyone who knew him knew he couldn't stand his parents. The way they controlled him, manipulated him, used him as a status symbol. He paused. But knowing something and proving it in court are two different things. Marcus's mind raced through tactical options. Limited time, hostile force with superior resources, friendly assets minimal, terrain advantage temporary. What if Rachel wasn't a single mother? He said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. What if she was married to someone stable? Someone with property, income, military service record? Brennan's eyes narrowed. You're talking about marriage of convenience. I'm talking about legal protection.
Marcus, that's...
Rachel started. Think about it. Marcus turned to face her. Montana law recognizes spousal custody rights. If you were my wife, the Morrisons couldn't just take the kids. They'd have to prove both of us were unfit. And I'm a decorated combat veteran with a clean record and this property in my name. That changes everything.
You can't be serious.
I'm completely serious. Rachel laughed, a sound bordering on hysterical.
You want to marry me? We met 4 hours ago.
I want to protect your children. Marriage is the fastest legal route to do that.
It's also insane.
Is it more insane than letting them take Emma and the boys and Grace? Marcus's voice was quiet but unyielding. Because that's what happens if we do nothing. You know it. I know it. Tom knows it. Brennan cleared his throat. He's not wrong, Rachel. Legally speaking, a stable two-parent household, especially one with a veteran, that would significantly complicate the Morrisons' case, maybe even stop it cold.
But we don't love each other. We don't even know each other.
Love's got nothing to do with custody law, Brennan said. Law cares about stability, resources, ability to provide. Marcus has all three. Rachel looked at Marcus, really looked, saw the scars on his face and hands, saw the prosthetic leg he carried with quiet dignity, saw the 6 years of loneliness carved into the lines around his eyes, saw a man who'd lost everything and somehow found the strength to offer what little he had left to strangers.
Why would you do this?
She whispered. Marcus thought of Eleanor, of William, of the empty years since their deaths, years he'd spent existing without living, breathing without purpose. Because I couldn't save my family, he said. But maybe I can save yours. Emma pulled away from Rachel and walked straight to Marcus. She looked up at him with those two old eyes that had seemed too much.
If you marry Mama, she said carefully, would that make you our dad?
Marcus crouched down to her level. That would be up to you. I'd be your stepfather legally. But what you call me, how you feel about it, that's your choice. I won't force anything.
Would you protect us? Really protect us?
with my life.
Do you promise?
I promise. Emma studied his face for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to her mother.
Mama? I think we should do it. Emma, sweetheart, I'm serious, Mama.
Emma's voice was steady.
I don't want to live with Grammy and Grandpa Morrison. They're mean. They say things that make you cry. They never ask about us, just about how we're doing in school like we're some kind of test score. And they...
She stopped, lower lip trembling.
They said Daddy died because you stressed him out.
Rachel made a wounded sound.
Baby, that's not... I know it's not true. But they said it anyway. And if they get us, they'll keep saying things like that until Noah and Liam and Grace believe it.
Emma's eyes filled with tears.
I can't let that happen, Mama. I can't.
The twins had woken up during the conversation. They stood together by the sofa, silent as always, watching. Ranger had moved to sit between them and the adults, creating a barrier of fur and loyalty. What do you boys think? Marcus asked gently. They didn't answer, but the one with freckles, Noah, reached out and took his brother's hand. Then he pointed at Marcus and nodded once. Deliberate. Clear. Liam did the same. Rachel covered her face with her hands.
This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, Marcus agreed. It is. But sometimes crazy is the only option that makes sense. Brennan stood up carefully, testing his balance. If you're going to do this, you need to do it fast. And you need to do it right. No paperwork mistakes, no technicalities they can exploit.
How fast?
Rachel asked. Tomorrow. Soon as Father Vicente at St. Michael's can perform the ceremony. Brennan headed for the door. I'll arrange it, but Rachel, you need to understand, this only works if it looks real. If the Morrisons can prove it's a marriage of convenience, a judge will annul it, and you'll be worse off than before.
How do we make it look real?
You live together, you present as a couple, you... Brennan paused. You make it look like you're building a life together, not just a legal defense. After Brennan left, fighting his way back into the storm, the cottage fell silent except for the wind's howl and the fire's crackle. Rachel stood at the window, staring into the darkness. Marcus gave her space, checking on the kids, making sure they were warm and settled. When he returned, Rachel spoke without turning around.
I don't know how to do this.
Do what?
Drag someone else into my mess. You've already been through so much. You've lost so much. And here I am asking you to risk everything for people you barely know.
Marcus moved to stand beside her. Their reflections wavered in the storm-darkened glass. Two ghosts learning how to be solid again. You're not asking, he said. I'm offering.
Why?
I told you, because I couldn't save my family.
That's not the whole reason.
Rachel turned to face him.
Nobody does something this big just out of guilt. So tell me the truth. Why are you really doing this?
Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the hurricane raged. Inside, 4 children slept fitfully, depending on decisions made by adults they barely knew. Because, he said finally, for 6 years I've been waiting to die. Not actively, not suicidally, just waiting, going through the motions, existing. And then tonight you knocked on my door with 3 kids and a baby who couldn't breathe. And for the first time since Eleanor and William died, I felt something that wasn't pain. He met her eyes. I felt needed. And maybe that makes me selfish, using your crisis to feel like I matter again. But I'm done apologizing for wanting a reason to wake up in the morning. Rachel's breath caught.
Marcus,
you don't have to love me, he continued. You don't even have to like me. But I'm asking you to let me do this. Let me be useful.
Let me protect something that matters. Because if I can't do that, then what the hell did I survive for? They stood in the silence that followed, two broken people seeing their own pain reflected in each other's eyes. "Okay," Rachel whispered finally. "Okay?" "Okay, we'll do it. We'll get married. We'll fight the Morrisons together." She wiped her eyes. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "This is temporary. Once the custody case is settled, once the kids are safe, we figure out what comes next. No assumptions. No expectations." "Agreed." "And you don't do this out of guilt. You don't sacrifice yourself to make up for people you couldn't save. That's not fair to you or to us." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then you don't do this out of desperation. You're not settling for less than you deserve just because you're scared. When this is over, if you want out, you walk away. No guilt, no obligation." "Deal." They shook hands, formal, awkward, two people binding themselves together with legal promises and impossible hope. Emma appeared in the doorway, sleep-rumpled and worried. "I heard talking. Are you fighting?" "No, baby," Rachel said. "We're not fighting. We're planning." "Planning what?" Rachel looked at Marcus. He nodded. "Planning a wedding," Rachel said. "A very small, very fast wedding." Emma's eyes went wide. Then, slowly, she smiled. The first real smile Rachel had seen on her daughter's face in months. "Can I wear a dress?" "We'll find you something beautiful," Rachel promised, pulling her close. As Rachel carried Emma back to bed, Marcus stood at the window and watched the storm. Somewhere out there, the Morrison family was sharpening their weapons, preparing for battle. They had money, power, connections, but they didn't have what Marcus had learned in 3 tours of combat. That sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't the biggest or most expensive. Sometimes it was simply the willingness to stand your ground and refuse to retreat, no matter what forces gathered against you. Tomorrow he would marry a woman he'd known for less than a day. Tomorrow he would become stepfather to 4 traumatized children. Tomorrow he would declare war on one of the most powerful families in Georgia. And he would win. Because that's what Marines did. They fought impossible battles against impossible odds. And they brought everyone home. The generator died at 4 a.m. Marcus woke instantly to the sudden silence, his hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there before his mind fully processed where he was. The cottage plunged into darkness except for the dying embers in the wood stove. He heard Rachel moving in the bedroom, heard Grace's sleepy whimper, heard Emma's whispered reassurance to her brothers. A family learning to function in crisis. He knew that rhythm, had lived it overseas. Marcus fed the stove, coaxing the fire back to life. Orange light pushed back the darkness inch by inch. His prosthetic ached where the socket met flesh, always did in the cold, but he ignored it. Pain was just information. You acknowledged it and moved on. Rachel emerged carrying Grace, the baby fussing against her shoulder. "No power?" "Generator's out of fuel. I've got maybe 20 gallons in the shed, but with the flooding..." He didn't finish. They both knew reaching the shed meant wading through chest-deep water in hurricane conditions. "How long can we last without it?" "Wood stove will keep us warm. I've got enough food for maybe a week if we ration. Water's the problem."
Well, pump needs electricity.
Rachel's face went tight. "The kids need water, Marcus. Grace needs clean bottles and Noah's been sick. If we can't..." "I'll get to the shed." He was already pulling on his waterproof jacket. "I've done water crossings in worse conditions than this." "You'll drown." "I won't." He whistled for Ranger, who appeared instantly from where he'd been sleeping with the twins. Ranger's trained for water rescue. If I get in trouble, he'll know.
That's not reassuring.
Marcus met her eyes. Rachel, I've survived 3 IED blasts, 2 firefights, and a helicopter crash. I'm not dying in my own backyard.
Your confidence doesn't make physics less dangerous.
No, but it keeps me moving forward. He checked his watch. It's 5 hours until we need to be at St. Michael's. I'll be back in 30 minutes with fuel. Then we get married, and we fight. Rachel grabbed his arm as he headed for the door.
Marcus, wait.
He turned. She struggled for words, finally settling on,
Thank you for all of this. For caring about people you don't owe anything to.
I owe everyone everything, Marcus said quietly. That's what happens when you're the one who survived. Before she could respond, he was gone, Ranger at his heels, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness where the storm still raged. Rachel stood holding Grace, listening to the wind scream, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she still believed in, that this stranger she was about to marry would come back alive. Marcus returned 43 minutes later, soaked through and bleeding from a gash on his shoulder where debris had caught him, but carrying 2 fuel cans. He didn't complain, just refilled the generator, cleaned the wound himself, and started making coffee with the methodical efficiency of a man who'd learned to function through worse. Emma watched him from the kitchen doorway.
You're bleeding.
Just a scratch.
Daddy used to say that.
Just a scratch. Even when it wasn't. Her voice was small.
And then one day it wasn't a scratch, and he didn't come home.
Marcus set down the coffee pot and crouched to her level, ignoring the pain in his leg. Emma, I can't promise I'll never get hurt, but I can promise I'll always fight to come back. Always.
How do you know?
Because I've got 4 people depending on me now. That's stronger than any storm. Emma studied his face, looking for the lie adults always told children. She didn't find one.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, I believe you.
She paused.
Can I ask you something?
Anything.
After you marry Mama, will you still want us? Or will you get tired of us being broken and leave like everybody else?
Marcus felt the words like a punch to the chest. This child, this brave, exhausted child, had been abandoned so many times by adults who should have protected her that she expected it as default. Emma, listen to me. You're not broken. None of you are. You're hurt. There's a difference. He touched her hand gently. Broken means can't be fixed. Hurt means you're still healing. And healing takes time, but it happens. I promise you that.
You're hurt too, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
But you still get up every day.
I do. Emma nodded slowly.
Then maybe we can all heal together.
Maybe we can. By 7:30, Sheriff Brennan returned with Father Vicente, an elderly priest with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly from age or cold, or both. He took in the scene, the makeshift family, the exhausted mother, the Marine who'd agreed to marry her, and simply said, "Tell me what you need."
We need this to be legal, Marcus said.
Ironclad. No loopholes the Morrisons can exploit. Father Vicente pulled out paperwork. I've handled 3 military marriages in my career. 2 were couples who'd known each other for less than a week before deployment. Both marriages lasted 20+ years. Sometimes necessity creates stronger bonds than romance. Rachel signed her name with shaking hands. Marcus's signature was steady, controlled. The priest witnessed both. Do you have rings? Father Vicente asked. Marcus hadn't thought of that. Neither had Rachel. I do. Brennan pulled a small box from his pocket. My wife's. She passed 2 years ago. Cancer. She'd want them used for something that mattered. Marcus took the simple gold band, surprisingly heavy in his palm. Rachel accepted the matching ring with tears in her eyes. Are we really doing this? She whispered. We're really doing this, Marcus confirmed. The ceremony was supposed to start at 8:15. At 8:10, Marcus's satellite phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Kane? Staff Sergeant Kane? The voice was female, professional, cold as surgical steel. My name is Diane Hutchinson. I represent the Morrison family in a custody matter regarding Emma, Noah, Liam, and Grace Morrison. Marcus's blood went cold. How did you get this number? We have resources, Staff Sergeant. Substantial resources. A pause. I'm calling as a courtesy. We're aware that Ms. Morrison is currently in your home. We're also aware that she missed her scheduled custody hearing, which has resulted in an emergency order being issued for the children's immediate removal. She missed the hearing because of a mandatory evacuation. Semantics. The order stands. However, my clients are willing to be reasonable. If Ms. Morrison surrenders the children voluntarily within the next 2 hours, we'll petition to have the contempt charges dropped. And if she doesn't? Then we'll pursue kidnapping charges. Federal charges, given that state lines were crossed during the evacuation. Hutchinson's voice didn't waver. Staff Sergeant Kane, I've researched your record. You're a decorated veteran, a good man. Don't throw away your future defending someone else's poor choices. Marcus looked at Rachel, at the children gathered around her, at the family he'd known for less than 24 hours, but was about to legally bind himself to. Ms. Hutchinson, I'm also a Marine, which means I don't abandon people under fire. You want these kids? You come through me. That's your final answer? That's my only answer. Then I'll see you in court, Staff Sergeant. And I promise you, you will lose everything. She hung up. Marcus lowered the phone. His hands weren't shaking. Combat calm had settled over him, the clarity that came when the shooting started and thinking became doing. They know, Rachel said. It wasn't a question. They know. How much time do we have? 2 hours? Maybe less. Marcus turned to Father Vicente. Can you do this ceremony in under 10 minutes? The priest nodded. I can do it in 5. They stood in front of the wood stove with 4 children as witnesses and a Belgian Malinois as the unofficial best man. Father Vicente opened his worn Bible and began. We are gathered here in the sight of God. Emma interrupted. Father Vicente, can I say something first? The priest smiled gently. Of course, child. Emma looked at Marcus, then at her mother. When Daddy died, I stopped believing in miracles. Grammy Morrison said miracles don't exist, that we just have to accept what happens and move on. Her voice strengthened. But then the storm came, and Mama drove us through the worst night ever, and we ended up here, at this exact house, with this exact person who could help us. And that's not coincidence. That's a miracle. Rachel was crying. Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. Emma continued. So I want to say thank you. To God, and to Marcus, and to Ranger, too, for reminding me that miracles are real. And family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when everything's falling apart. Amen, Father Vicente said softly. Amen to that. The ceremony resumed. Traditional vows, spoken in voices that shook with emotion and exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. Do you, Marcus Kane, take Rachel Morrison to be your lawfully wedded wife? Marcus looked at Rachel. Really looked. Saw the strength that had carried her through widowhood and poverty and fighting for her children. Saw the fear she wore like armor. Saw the woman underneath it all who just wanted her kids to be safe. I do. And do you, Rachel Morrison, take Marcus Kane to be your lawfully wedded husband? Rachel thought of Jake, of the years they'd had before deployments and PTSD and the distance that had grown between them. Of loving someone and losing them. Of being so afraid to love again that she'd almost forgotten how. But this wasn't about love. This was about survival, about protection, about giving her children a chance at a normal life. So why did her chest ache when Marcus slipped the ring on her finger? I do, she whispered. By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia and the grace of God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Father Vicente closed his Bible. Marcus, you may kiss your bride. They hadn't discussed this part. Marcus leaned in carefully, giving Rachel every opportunity to pull back. She didn't. Their lips met, brief, chaste, awkward. The kiss of two people who didn't know each other, but were bound together anyway. When they pulled apart, Emma was clapping. The twins had tentative smiles on their faces. Grace gurgled happily, oblivious to the significance of what had just happened. Ranger howled once, long, mournful, beautiful. It sounded like a blessing. Sheriff Brennan cleared his throat. Hate to break up the celebration, but we've got a problem. What now? Marcus asked. Judge Carson just issued a second emergency order. This one's a warrant for Rachel's arrest. Child endangerment, custodial interference, contempt of court. Brennan's face was grim. And it gets worse. Richard Morrison is personally leading the convoy coming up here. They're 30 minutes out. The roads are still flooded, Rachel said. They've got a military-grade transport vehicle, National Guard surplus that Morrison bought at auction. Brennan pulled up a photo on his phone. This thing can drive through 6 feet of water. They're coming, Rachel. And they're coming now. Emma grabbed Marcus's hand. What do we do? Marcus's mind raced through tactical options. They were outnumbered, outgunned legally, and trapped by geography. The cottage was defensible, but not a fortress. Running would only delay the inevitable. Fighting would get him arrested and the kids taken anyway. He needed leverage, evidence, something that could stop the Morrisons cold. Rachel, did Jake keep any kind of record? Journal, letters, anything that showed his relationship with his parents? He had journals, military journals from all his deployments. He wrote in them every night. Rachel's eyes widened. He wrote about his parents, about how controlling they were, how they manipulated him, how he was terrified they'd try to take the kids if anything happened to him. Where are these journals? The beach house, the one Jake inherited from his grandmother. It's the only thing the Morrisons couldn't take, because Jake put it in my name before he died. She grabbed Marcus's arms. But Marcus, that house is in the hurricane's path. It's 20 miles from here, and the roads— I don't care about the roads. Marcus turned to Brennan. Tom, how long until Morrison gets here? 30 minutes, maybe 45 with the conditions. And how long would it take to get to the beach house and back? In this weather? In normal vehicles? Impossible. Brennan paused. But my truck has a lift kit and all-terrain tires. If you pushed it hard, knew the back roads, didn't stop for anything, maybe 90 minutes round trip? That's cutting it too close, Rachel said. It's the only shot we have. Marcus was already moving, grabbing gear. Those journals prove the Morrisons are unfit. They're our smoking gun. Then I'm coming with you. No, you need to stay with the kids. If Morrison gets here and you're gone, Brennan won't be able to hold him off. Rachel's jaw set.
Those are Jake's journals. Jake's words. I know where he kept them, how he organized them. You'll waste time searching while I can walk straight to them.
She turned to Emma.
Baby, can you watch your brothers in grace, just for a little while?
Emma's face was pale but determined.
I can do it. Father Vicente will help, right?
Of course, the priest said. The twins moved closer to Ranger, who positioned himself between them and the door like a furry sentinel. Marcus looked at Rachel, saw the fear in her eyes, saw the fierce determination underneath it, recognized in her what he'd seen in the best Marines he'd served with, the ability to function through terror because the mission mattered more than safety. Okay, he said. We go together. But we do this fast and we don't take unnecessary risks.
Agreed.
I mean it, Rachel. We get in, grab the journals, get out. If the house is too damaged or too dangerous, we abort. Your kids need you alive.
Our kids,
Rachel corrected softly. As of 5 minutes ago, they're our kids. The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. Our kids. A family he'd inherited through emergency vows and desperate circumstances. A family he was about to risk his life to protect. Our kids, he repeated. Let's go keep them. They were halfway to the door when Emma's voice stopped them.
Mama, wait!
Rachel turned. Emma was holding something in her hands, a small stuffed bear, worn and faded, one eye missing.
This was Daddy's. He carried it through all his deployments. He said it kept him safe.
Emma, I can't take Mr. Buttons. He's yours now.
No, Mama. Daddy would want you to have him, both of you.
Emma pressed the bear into Rachel's hands.
So you come back. So you both come back.
Rachel crushed the bear to her chest, tears streaming.
We will, baby. I promise.
Don't promise if you can't keep it, Emma said, suddenly looking every bit the 8-year-old she was.
That's what Grammy Morrison always says. Don't make promises you can't keep.
Then I'm not promising, Marcus said, kneeling down. I'm giving you my word as a United States Marine. Your mother and I will come back. Together. Emma searched his face one last time. Then she nodded.
Okay, I believe you.
As Marcus and Rachel ran for Brennan's truck, fighting through wind that tried to knock them sideways, rain that stung like needles, Marcus realized something that terrified him more than enemy fire ever had. He'd just made a promise to a traumatized 8-year-old, and if he broke it, he'd destroy whatever fragile trust she'd managed to rebuild. The stakes had never been higher. The mission had never mattered more. And somewhere 20 miles away, in a house being battered by Hurricane Elise, lay the evidence that could save 4 children, or the trap that could kill the only 2 people standing between them and a family that saw them as possessions rather than people. Marcus gunned the engine. The truck lurched forward into the storm, and behind them, at the lighthouse keeper's cottage, Emma stood at the window watching them disappear, holding her brothers close, and whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone was listening to anymore. The first 3 miles were manageable. Brennan's truck handled the flooded roads with aggressive competence, tires churning through water that came halfway up the doors. Marcus drove with the intensity of a man on a combat mission, hands steady on the wheel, eyes scanning for hazards. Rachel gripped the dashboard, Jake's stuffed bear clutched in her other hand.
There's a shortcut through the old timber road, about 5 miles ahead. It'll save us 10 minutes.
Will it be flooded?
Probably, but it's higher elevation than the main road.
Marcus nodded, committing the information to memory. Tell me about the journals. How many are there?
8. One for each deployment. He kept them in a military footlocker under the guest bedroom floor. There's a false panel. You'd never know it was there unless you knew where to look.
What did he write about? Rachel was quiet for a moment.
Everything. The missions, the men he served with, the things he saw.
Her voice dropped.
The things he couldn't unsee.
Did he write about you?
Sometimes. In the beginning, a lot. Beautiful things that made me cry when I found them after he died.
She paused.
But in the later journals, toward the end, he wrote more about his parents.
About how they were already positioning themselves to take the kids. He documented conversations, threats, manipulations going back years. Marcus glanced at her. They planned this before he died?
He thought so. He wrote about how his mother kept suggesting I wasn't capable of raising children alone, how his father kept talking about trust funds and proper education, and all these coded ways of saying I wasn't good enough.
Rachel's hands tightened on the bear.
And then Jake died, and suddenly all those veiled threats became actions.
The truck hit a pothole submerged under rushing water. Rachel gasped as they lurched sideways, but Marcus corrected smoothly. You okay?
Yeah, I hate water. Ever since the accident.
What accident?
When I was 12. My dad took me fishing. Boat capsized. He drowned trying to save me.
Rachel's voice went flat.
I survived. He didn't. Story of my life, right? The people I love die, and I just keep breathing.
Marcus understood that guilt, lived with it every day. Your father would be proud of you. What you're doing for your kids. Would he? Because most days I feel like I'm failing them. Like Emma has to be the adult because I can't hold it together. Like the twins stopped talking because I'm too broken to fix them. Like Grace would be better off with, "Stop!" Marcus's voice cut through her spiral. I know what you're doing. I do it too. We replay every decision, every moment, looking for where we failed. But Rachel, your kids aren't broken because of you. They're surviving because of you. There's a difference.
You sound very sure.
I sound like someone who spent 6 years blaming himself for dying wrong, until I realized I was actually living wrong. He navigated around a fallen tree. I survived that IED. My buddies didn't. For years, I thought that meant I owed them something, owed the universe some kind of penance. Took me until about 10 hours ago to understand that maybe I survived so I could do this. Right here. Right now. Rachel studied his profile.
You really believe that?
I'm starting to. They drove in silence for several minutes. Then Rachel spoke again, softer.
Tell me about your wife. About your son.
Marcus's jaw tightened. Why?
Because you're risking your life from my children. I should at least know about yours.
He didn't answer immediately. The memories were still sharp-edged, still capable of cutting deep. But maybe that was the point. Maybe they should hurt. Maybe that meant they mattered. Eleanor was a teacher, he said finally. 3rd grade. She had this way of making every kid feel special, even the difficult ones, especially the difficult ones. His throat tightened. William was 3 when they died. Smart as hell, obsessed with trucks and dinosaurs. He'd memorize facts and recite them while Eleanor cooked dinner, and I pretended to understand toddler logic. How did it happen? Drunk driver. Head-on collision. Eleanor died on impact. William survived 3 hours. Marcus's hands clenched the steering wheel. I was in Afghanistan. By the time they reached me, by the time they got me on a flight home, he was already gone. I never got to say goodbye. Rachel's breath caught.
Marcus, I'm so sorry.
Everyone's sorry, but sorry doesn't change the fact that I wasn't there, that my son died calling for his daddy, and I was halfway around the world shooting at people I didn't know to protect people I'd never meet.
You were serving your country.
I was running away. The admission came out raw, unfiltered. Things were hard with Eleanor after my second deployment. I had nightmares, anger issues, all the standard PTSD stuff. I volunteered for the third tour because fighting was easier than fixing my marriage. And because of that choice, I wasn't there when they needed me.
You can't know that you being there would have changed anything.
No, but I'll never know if it would have. Marcus's voice cracked.
That's what I live with. Not knowing if the one time that really mattered, I could have made a difference.
Rachel reached across the console and took his hand. She didn't say anything, just held on. Sometimes the only comfort was knowing someone else understood the weight. The Timber Road turnoff appeared through the rain. Marcus took it without.
The beach house appeared like a ghost through the rain. A 2-story structure that had once been white, but was now weathered to gray. Hurricane Elise had not been kind. Windows were shattered. Part of the roof was gone. The front porch sagged dangerously. Marcus pulled the truck as close as he dared. "Stay here while I check structural integrity."
No, we do this together.
Rachel was already opening her door. They ran for the house, wind trying to knock them sideways. The front door was wedged shut by debris. Marcus kicked it open, splinters flying. Water pooled ankle-deep in the entryway.
Guest bedrooms upstairs,
Rachel said. They climbed the stairs carefully, testing each step. The house groaned around them, timbers creaking with a sound that spoke of imminent collapse. The guest bedroom was somehow intact. Rachel dropped to her knees, running her hands along the floorboards until she found the seam.
"Here, help me."
Together they pried up the false panel.
Underneath was the footlocker, battered and covered in dust, but sealed tight.
Rachel's hands shook as she worked the combination lock.
Please work, please.
The lock clicked open. Inside were 8 leather-bound journals, Jake's handwriting across the covers, marking dates and locations. Rachel pulled them out with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face.
"He kept his promise,"
she whispered.
"He documented everything."
Marcus grabbed the journals, flipping through them quickly. Page after page of Jake's neat handwriting, detailing conversations with his parents, their controlling behavior, their plans to take custody if anything happened to him. Then Marcus found the letter. It was tucked into the back of the last journal, sealed in plastic, addressed to Rachel in Jake's handwriting. To be opened in the event of my death. Rachel stared at it like it might burn her.
I can't read it. Not now."
"You don't have to. But we need to take it."
They gathered everything: journals, the letter, loose papers that had fallen from the pages. Marcus was about to close the footlocker when he saw something else. A manila envelope marked Morrison Family Trust, Confidential. He opened it. Inside were legal documents, trust documents, and a letter from Richard Morrison's law firm dated 2 weeks before Jake's death. Marcus read quickly, his blood running cold. "Rachel, look at this." She took the papers. As she read, her face went from confusion to horror to fury.
"They planned it," she breathed. "They planned to take the kids before Jake even died. This letter, it outlines the entire custody strategy, establishing me as unfit, gathering evidence, identifying sympathetic judges. All of it dated before the training accident."
"Keep reading." Rachel's hands shook as she continued. Then she stopped, face draining of all color.
"Oh my God."
"What?"
The training accident. The one that killed Jake. Her voice was hollow.
It happened at Camp Lejeune during a routine equipment inspection. The investigation ruled it mechanical failure. But Marcus, look at this notation. Look at who requested the specific equipment Jake was inspecting that day. Marcus looked, felt his stomach drop. The request had come from a civilian contractor, a company owned by Richard Morrison's investment firm. This doesn't prove anything, Marcus said carefully. Correlation isn't causation.
But it's suspicious as hell.
Rachel clutched the papers.
Jake was going to file for divorce from his parents, that's what he called it. Cutting legal and financial ties. He told me 2 weeks before he died. And then suddenly there's a convenient accident that makes me a widow and the Morrisons get custody papers drawn up within days?
Rachel,
I'm not saying they killed him. I'm saying the timing is too perfect. And I'm saying a judge needs to see this.
She grabbed the envelope.
This is evidence. Real evidence.
A massive crack echoed through the house. The entire structure shuddered. "We need to go," Marcus said. "Now!" They ran for the stairs. Behind them, the guest bedroom ceiling collapsed inward with a sound like artillery fire. They hit the first floor as the second story began to cave. Marcus grabbed Rachel's hand, pulling her toward the door. Water was waist-deep now, rushing through the broken windows with increasing force. The house groaned like a dying animal. They were 3 feet from the door when the front wall buckled inward. Marcus threw himself forward, tackling Rachel, wrapping his body around hers and the journals as the wall came down. Pain exploded through his shoulder where debris struck. His prosthetic leg twisted at an unnatural angle.
"Marcus!"
Rachel's voice was muffled against his chest. "I'm okay. Move. Move now." They crawled through the wreckage, through water and broken glass and splintered wood. Marcus's leg screamed where the prosthetic had torn loose from the socket, but he ignored it. Pain was just information. They burst out of the house seconds before the entire structure collapsed behind them, falling in on itself like a house of cards. Rachel lay gasping in the mud, clutching the journals to her chest. Marcus rolled onto his back, breathing hard, feeling blood run warm down his arm.
"We did it,"
Rachel panted.
"We actually—"
Headlights cut through the rain. Not from the direction they'd come, from the opposite direction. A massive vehicle, military grade, riding high above the floodwaters, approached with predatory purpose. Marcus struggled to his feet, favoring his injured leg. "Get to the truck, now!"
"What is that?"
"That's the Morrisons." The transport vehicle stopped 30 feet away. 3 men climbed out. 2 were clearly hired muscle, thick necks, tactical vests, the look of former military gone mercenary. The third was older, mid-50s, with silver hair and a face that spoke of privilege and authority. Richard Morrison stepped forward, water sloshing around his expensive boots. "Mrs. Morrison, or should I say Mrs. Kane, yes, we know about your little courthouse wedding. Very touching. Very desperate." Rachel moved closer to Marcus.
"Stay away from us."
"I'm not here for you. I'm here for my grandchildren."
"Those children are legally mine," Marcus said. "I'm their stepfather as of 2 hours ago. You don't have authority to take them."
"Actually, I do." Richard pulled out papers, sealed and official-looking. "Emergency custody order, signed by Judge Carson. Gives me immediate temporary custody pending investigation of child endangerment charges against Rachel."
"That order's garbage and you know it,"
Marcus said. "Perhaps, but it's legal garbage, which means those children come with me. Today. Now." Richard's smile was cold. "You can fight it in court, of course, drag this out for months, years even. But in the meantime, Emma, Noah, Liam, and Grace will be living in my home, under my care, learning to forget their mother ever existed. Rachel made a sound, part sob, part fury. You're a monster. I'm a man who knows what's best for his grandchildren, something their mother clearly does not. Richard gestured to his men. Retrieve the children from the lighthouse property. Use necessary force if the staff sergeant interferes. The two men started forward. Marcus positioned himself between them and Rachel, balanced on his one good leg, injured but unbowed. You come through me, he said quietly. Marcus, don't. Rachel grabbed his arm. They'll hurt you, or worse. Please don't. I gave Emma my word. Marcus's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I told her I'd come back. That means I protect what's mine. And those kids? They're mine now. One of the men reached for his weapon. Marcus's combat instincts kicked in, calculating angles and vulnerabilities, even as his body prepared to fight a battle he couldn't win. Then, sirens cut through the storm. Red and blue lights reflected off the floodwaters. Sheriff Brennan's voice boomed through a megaphone. Richard Morrison, step away from the civilians. Your men are to stand down immediately. Richard's face contorted with rage. Sheriff, I have a legal order. You have a fraudulent order, obtained through illegal forum shopping and falsified evidence. Brennan climbed out of his patrol truck, 3 deputies behind him. We've been investigating your custody petition. Funny thing, when we started digging into the paperwork, we found some interesting discrepancies. You have no authority. I have plenty of authority, especially when it comes to preventing kidnapping. Brennan approached Richard directly. Here's how this is going to work. You and your men are going to get back in that vehicle and drive away. Mrs. Kane and Staff Sergeant Kane are going to return to their home, and tomorrow morning, we're all going to appear before an impartial judge, not one of your country club buddies, and let the evidence speak for itself. The evidence is on my side, Richard snarled. Rachel stepped forward, water-damaged journals clutched to her chest. Is it? Because I've got 8 journals written by your son documenting years of psychological abuse. I've got letters showing you planned this custody grab before Jake died. And I've got documents suggesting you might know more about his death than you've admitted. Richard's face went white. You're lying. Am I? Want to bet your reputation on it? Want to explain to a judge why your investment company requested the specific equipment that failed and killed your son? Want to explain the trust documents establishing custody strategy 2 weeks before his death? For the first time, Richard Morrison looked uncertain. Looked cornered. Those documents are privileged, he said, but his voice had lost its authority. These documents are evidence in a custody case, Brennan said, and potentially evidence in a wrongful death investigation. So here's your choice, Morrison. Walk away now, or I arrest you and your men for attempted kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Richard looked at his men, looked at Brennan's deputies, looked at Marcus and Rachel standing together, battered, but unbroken. This isn't over, he said finally. Yeah, Marcus replied. It is. You just don't know it yet. The Morrisons climbed back into their vehicle and drove away, taillights disappearing into the storm. Rachel collapsed against Marcus, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and delayed terror. He held her up with his good arm, his injured leg barely supporting them both. We got them, Rachel gasped. We actually got them. We got the evidence, Marcus corrected. Now we have to use it. Brennan approached, offering support. Let's get you 2 back to your kids. They've been worried sick. As they loaded into the patrol truck, Rachel clutching Jake's journals like sacred texts, Marcus felt the pain in his shoulder and leg finally register. felt the exhaustion pulling at him, felt the impossibility of what they'd just accomplished. They'd survived the storm, retrieved the evidence, faced down the enemy. But the real battle, the one in the courtroom, the one for the hearts and minds and futures of 4 traumatized children, that battle was just beginning. And as the truck carried them back through the flooded roads toward the lighthouse cottage where Emma and Noah and Liam and Grace waited, Marcus realized something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. He'd stopped fighting to survive. He'd started fighting to live. And that made all the difference.
Emma saw the headlights first.
She'd been standing at the window for 40 minutes, refusing to move despite Father Vicente's gentle suggestions that she rest. When Brennan's truck appeared through the thinning rain, she pressed both hands against the glass.
"They're back,"
she whispered. Then louder, voice cracking with relief and residual fear.
"Mama's back."
She ran for the door before anyone could stop her, bursting into the storm without a coat. Rachel was barely out of the truck when Emma collided with her, arms wrapping tight enough to bruise.
"You came back. You came back. You came back. You came back."
"I promised, didn't I?" Rachel held her daughter with one arm, the journals tucked against her chest with the other.
"I'll always come back, baby. Always."
Emma pulled back enough to see Marcus limping behind them, blood soaking through his jacket, his gait uneven.
"You're hurt."
"Just a little," Marcus said.
"You're bleeding a lot."
"Okay, maybe more than a little," he managed to smile. "But I kept my promise too. We both did." The twins appeared in the doorway, flanking Father Vicente. For a long moment, they just stared at Marcus and Rachel. Then Noah, quiet, traumatized Noah, who hadn't spoken in 8 months, opened his mouth.
"You came back,"
he whispered. The world stopped. Rachel's breath caught. Emma gasped. Even Ranger's tail went still.
"Noah?"
Rachel's voice was barely audible.
"Baby, did you just... You came back,"
Noah said again, louder. His brother Liam nodded frantically beside him, tears streaming down both their faces. Rachel dropped to her knees in the mud, pulling both boys into her arms. The journals fell forgotten as she held her sons, sobbing into their hair while they clung to her with desperate strength. Marcus stood watching, throat too tight to speak. This moment, this fracture in a family's trauma beginning to heal, was why they'd driven through a hurricane. Why they'd risked everything. Why the pain in his shoulder and leg meant absolutely nothing. Father Vicente approached quietly.
"The Lord works in mysterious ways."
"Yeah," Marcus managed. "He really does." Inside they dried off, and Marcus let Rachel clean and bandage his shoulder while the children hovered close, unwilling to let their parents out of sight. Grace woke from her nap, saw Marcus, and reached for him with chubby hands.
"Dada,"
she babbled. Everyone froze.
"She's just making sounds,"
Rachel said quickly.
"She doesn't..."
"Dada," Grace insisted, grabbing for Marcus's face. Marcus took the baby carefully, his injured arm protesting. Grace settled against his chest with a contented sigh, one tiny fist curling into his shirt. She looked up at him with Jake's eyes, hazel touched with gold, and smiled. "Well," Sheriff Brennan said from the doorway, "I'd say that's pretty definitive."
"She doesn't understand what she's saying,"
Rachel insisted, but her voice shook. "Maybe she understands better than we do," Marcus said softly. The journals lay spread across the kitchen table, 8 years of Jake Morrison's life in neat handwriting. Rachel had been reading them for an hour, tears streaming silently as she absorbed her husband's words from beyond the grave. Emma sat beside her, reading over her shoulder.
Daddy loved you so much, Mama. I know, baby. He was scared of Grammy and Grandpa.
Yeah, he was. Rachel turned a page, her finger tracing Jake's words.
Listen to this entry. It's from 3 years ago, right after his 4th deployment.
She read aloud.
Mom called today. Asked again when I was going to do something about my marriage. Said Rachel wasn't the right kind of woman to raise Morrison children. I told her Rachel was the only woman I wanted raising my children. She laughed. Said if anything happened to me, they'd make sure the kids were raised properly. I didn't think much of it then. Now it sounds like a threat.
Marcus came to stand behind Rachel's chair. Keep reading. Rachel flipped forward several months. Here, this one's worse. Dad cornered me at the country club, told me he'd already talked to Hutchinson about custody arrangements. I said I wasn't planning on dying. He said plans change, that I should be realistic about Rachel's capabilities. I wanted to hit him. I didn't. I'm a Marine. We don't solve problems with violence. But God help me, sometimes I wish we did. That's evidence of premeditation, Brennan said. That's them planning custody grab before Jake's death. There's more. Rachel's hands shook as she found another entry. This one's dated 1 week before the accident. I'm filing paperwork to legally separate myself from my parents' trust and financial interests. Rachel doesn't know yet. I want to surprise her. Finally be free of their control. Finally just be Jake Morrison, not Richard Morrison's son. The lawyer says it'll take about a month to finalize. I can wait a month for freedom. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. He never got his month, Emma said quietly. No, baby, he didn't. Rachel closed the journal carefully. But he gave us the tools to finish what he started. Marcus picked up the manila envelope they'd found, the one with the trust documents and the suspicious timing around Jake's death. Brennan, can we get an independent investigation into the training accident? Based on this, absolutely. Military's going to want to see this too. Brennan's face was grim. If there's even a chance that equipment failure was deliberate. We don't know that, Rachel interrupted. And honestly, I don't want to know. Not right now. She looked at her children. Right now, I just want to use this evidence to protect my kids. The rest, whether it was murder or coincidence, that's for prosecutors and investigators and people who have the energy to care. I'm too tired to carry more weight. Marcus understood. Knew when to fight and when to let others carry the battle. Fair enough. We've got enough to stop the custody case. That's what matters. The court hearing happened 3 days later. Hurricane Elise had passed, leaving destruction and flooding in her wake, but the roads were passable enough for the convoy of vehicles that converged on the county courthouse. Richard and Margaret Morrison arrived with their lawyer, Diane Hutchinson, and a team of 3 additional attorneys. They wore expensive suits and expressions of absolute confidence. Rachel arrived with Marcus, Sheriff Brennan, and a public defender who'd been reviewing the journals non-stop since they'd been retrieved. She wore a borrowed dress from the sheriff's sister and carried herself with the dignity of someone who'd survived worse than courtrooms. The children stayed at the lighthouse cottage with Father Vicente. Emma had wanted to come, to testify if needed, but Rachel had refused. You've had to be too grown up for too long, baby. Let the adults handle this one. Judge Patricia Hendricks, the same judge who'd recused herself from the emergency custody order, presided. She was 63, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every manipulation the legal system had to offer. I've reviewed the materials submitted by both parties, she began. Mrs. Kane, your journals and supporting documents make for compelling reading. They're my late husband's words, Your Honor, not mine. I'm aware, which gives them particular weight. Judge Hendricks turned to the Morrisons' table.
Mr. Morrison, would you care to explain why your investment company requested the specific equipment that failed during your son's training exercise?
Richard Morrison's lawyer stood. Your Honor, that's pure speculation and irrelevant to—
It's extremely relevant if it establishes a pattern of manipulation and control that would make my clients unfit guardians.
The judge's voice was ice. Mr. Morrison, I'm asking you directly. Did you have advance knowledge of equipment defects that resulted in your son's death?
Absolutely not. Richard's face was flushed. The insinuation is offensive and baseless.
Then you won't object to an independent investigation by military authorities? Richard's jaw tightened.
Of course not.
Good, because I've already requested one. Judge Hendricks set down the papers. However, that investigation is separate from the matter at hand. Today we're discussing custody of 4 minor children. Mrs. Kane, your husband's journals paint a disturbing picture of parental control and manipulation. Do you have additional evidence supporting your claim that the Morrisons are unfit guardians? Rachel stood. Her voice didn't shake.
Your Honor, I have 8 years of documented emotional abuse. I have evidence they planned to take my children before their father died.
I have testimony from Jake's Marine Corps colleagues about the strain his parents' behavior caused. And I have 4 children who are thriving in my care and who would be traumatized by removal from the only parent they've ever consistently known. The children are thriving? Margaret Morrison spoke for the first time, her voice dripping condescension.
Your Honor, Emma Morrison is 8 years old and has been acting as a parent to her siblings. The twin boys were selectively mute. The infant was nearly dead from hypothermia when they arrived at Staff Sergeant Kane's residence. If that's thriving, I'd hate to see failure.
Marcus stood before he could stop himself. Your Honor, may I speak? You're not a party to— I'm the children's stepfather. Legally, that makes me a party. Marcus's voice was controlled but intense. Emma was parentified because she had no other adult to depend on while her mother fought your client's legal assault. The twins were selectively mute because of trauma from losing their father, trauma your clients exacerbated by constant criticism of their mother. And Grace nearly died because Rachel was fleeing a hurricane while trying to escape your client's persecution. None of those situations were caused by Rachel's parenting. They were caused by your client's relentless campaign to destroy a grieving widow. Judge Hendricks studied Marcus for a long moment. Staff Sergeant Kane, you married Mrs. Morrison 3 days ago, during a hurricane, under emergency circumstances. Yes, Your Honor. Some might call that suspicious timing. Some might call it protection. Marcus met the judge's eyes without flinching. I'm a combat veteran. I spent 3 tours fighting to protect people I never met. When Rachel and her children showed up at my door in the middle of a hurricane, I did what I was trained to do. I protected them. The marriage makes that protection legal, but it was happening with or without paperwork. Why? Because I lost my wife and son 6 years ago. I know what it feels like when family is ripped away, and I will be damned if I stand by and watch it happen to someone else when I have the power to stop it. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hendricks leaned back in her chair. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, here's what I see. I see 2 wealthy, connected people who lost their son and decided the best way to honor him was to take his children from the woman he loved. I see a pattern of manipulation documented in your son's own words. I see questionable timing around his death that warrants further investigation. And I see 4 children who, according to every report filed since they entered Staff Sergeant Kane's home, are finally beginning to heal. Your Honor, Hutchinson started. I'm not finished. The judge's voice cut like a blade. The emergency custody order obtained by Judge Carson is hereby vacated. It was improperly filed, fraudulently obtained, and never should have been granted. Full custody of Emma, Noah, Liam, and Grace Morrison Kane is awarded to their mother, Rachel Kane, and stepfather, Marcus Kane. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, you are granted supervised visitation rights of 4 hours per month, contingent on completion of family therapy and pending the results of the military investigation into your son's death. Margaret Morrison stood, face white with fury.
This is outrageous. We have rights.
You had rights. You forfeited them when you weaponized your grief against your grandchildren's mother. Judge Hendricks slammed her gavel. This court is adjourned. Marcus caught Rachel as her knees gave out. She sobbed into his chest. Relief, grief, exhaustion, and something that might have been joy, all tangled together.
We won,
she gasped.
Marcus, we actually won.
We won, he confirmed, holding her steady. They can't touch you now. Can't touch the kids. You're safe.
We're safe, Rachel corrected, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. We're safe. The word hung between them, weighted with new meaning. Not just her and the kids. All of them. Together. 3 months later, autumn painted the Georgia coast in colors that looked like healing. Marcus stood on the lighthouse gallery, watching Emma teach the twins to fly a kite, while Rachel sat nearby with Grace on her lap. The children's transformation had been remarkable. Emma smiled more, laughed easier, and had started acting like an 8-year-old instead of a miniature adult. The twins not only spoke, but chattered constantly, making up for lost time with an enthusiasm that exhausted everyone around them. Grace had started walking, taking her first steps toward Marcus with absolute confidence that he'd catch her. Rachel looked different too. The haunted exhaustion had faded from her face, replaced by something softer. She'd started sleeping through the night,
Started singing again while she cooked. Started believing that maybe good things could last. Marcus felt the change in himself, too. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. The guilt still pressed on his chest some mornings, but it felt less like drowning and more like remembering. He'd started talking to a VA therapist, started believing that survival didn't require constant penance. Ranger had become the family dog in every sense, sleeping in the kids' rooms, following them around the property, performing his trained tasks for whoever needed them. He'd gained weight, his coat glossier, as if even the dog recognized they were finally home. The lighthouse keeper's cottage had been transformed too. Children's artwork covered the walls, toys littered the floors, noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family life filled rooms that had been silent for 6 years. Rachel climbed the spiral stairs to join Marcus on the gallery.
Kids are asking if we can have mac and cheese for dinner again.
We had mac and cheese yesterday.
And the day before. Apparently it's their new favorite food.
She leaned against the railing beside him.
How are you doing?
Good. Better than good, actually.
Your leg bothering you?
A little, but nothing I can't handle. Marcus watched Emma help Liam untangle the kite string with patient encouragement. She's going to be okay, you know. Emma. She's already more like a kid than when we met her.
Because she doesn't have to carry everything alone anymore.
Rachel paused.
Because we gave her permission to just be 8 years old.
We did good, didn't we?
We did great.
Rachel took his hand, lacing their fingers together.
Marcus, I need to tell you something.
His stomach tightened. Okay.
That first night, when you offered to marry me, you said love could come later, that we were doing this for protection, not romance.
I remember. I think I've been falling in love with you since about the second week. Rachel's voice shook slightly.
I didn't mean to. I wasn't looking for it. But watching you with the kids, seeing how gentle you are with Grace, how patient with the twins, how you treat Emma like a daughter instead of an obligation.
She stopped, swallowing hard.
I know this wasn't the deal. I know you signed up for protection, not complicated feelings. But I need to be honest with you, because if this is still just a marriage of convenience for you, I need to know. I need to protect myself.
Marcus turned to face her fully. Rachel, I need to be honest too. Her face went pale.
Okay.
I loved Eleanor. I'll always love Eleanor. She was my first wife, the mother of my son, and losing her nearly killed me. He took both her hands. But here's the thing about nearly dying. It teaches you not to waste second chances. I didn't marry you planning to fall in love, but somewhere between the hurricane and the courtroom, and watching Grace take her first steps toward me, I realized I already had. Rachel's breath caught.
You love me?
I love you. I love Emma's fierce protectiveness, and Noah's quiet observations, and Liam's terrible jokes, and Grace's absolute certainty that I'll always catch her. I love the family we accidentally became. His voice roughened. I love waking up to noise and going to bed exhausted and having someone to share coffee with in the mornings. I love that my house feels like a home again. And I love you, Rachel. Not despite the complicated circumstances. Because of them. Tears streamed down Rachel's face.
I wasn't supposed to feel this way. After Jake, I thought that part of me was dead, that I'd never want anyone again.
But
you opened your door in the middle of a hurricane, and you didn't just save our lives. You gave us a reason to believe in second chances.
She moved closer.
I love you too, Marcus. I love your terrible coffee and your stubborn independence, and the way you read bedtime stories with different voices for every character. I love how safe you make me feel. I love that you see my children as your children. I love...
He kissed her. Not the awkward, obligatory kiss from their wedding. This was different, deeper, real, weighted with 3 months of growing together and learning what family meant. When they pulled apart, Emma was watching from below with a knowing smile. "About time," she called up. Rachel laughed, wiping her eyes.
Were you spying? I'm 8, not blind. You guys have been making googly eyes at each other for weeks.
Googly eyes? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Total googly eyes, Noah confirmed. The googliest, Liam added. Even Grace babbled what sounded like agreement. That night, after the kids were asleep and the cottage was quiet except for Ranger's gentle snoring, Marcus and Rachel sat together on the porch. The lighthouse beams swept across the water in steady rhythm. On, off, a heartbeat of light in the darkness. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the hurricane had sent me somewhere else? Rachel asked quietly. If I'd knocked on a different door? Every day, Marcus admitted, but not in a bad way, more like grateful amazement that of all the doors in Georgia, you knocked on mine.
Do you think Jake would approve? Of us, I mean. Of me loving someone else.
Marcus thought about the journals, about Jake's words, about a man who'd loved his wife enough to document his parents' manipulation so she'd have ammunition to fight them after his death. I think Jake loved you enough to want you happy. And I think he loved his kids enough to want them protected by someone who'd die for them. He squeezed her hand. I also think he'd probably give me the standard military speech about taking care of his family, threaten me with consequences if I screw it up, and then tell me I better make you smile every day. Rachel smiled through tears.
He would absolutely do that.
Then I've got my orders. Marcus pulled her closer. Make Rachel smile. Protect the kids. Love this family with everything I've got. I can do that.
Promise?
I promise. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the water. Somewhere inside, 4 children slept safely. A dog guarded the door. A home had been built from wreckage and hope. Rachel had knocked on Marcus's door seeking shelter from a storm. She'd found a sanctuary, a partner, a father for her children, a second chance at love when she thought that door was permanently closed. Marcus had opened his door, expecting nothing but more empty years ahead. He'd found purpose, a family, a reason to wake up that wasn't just habit, but genuine want, a life worth living instead of just enduring. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves with trumpets and divine proclamations. Sometimes they arrive in the middle of a hurricane. Sometimes they knock 3 times on a lonely door and change everything. Sometimes they look like a desperate mother and 4 traumatized children standing in the rain, asking for help they weren't sure they deserved. Sometimes they look like a broken Marine who finds healing by offering his protection to strangers who become family. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to open the door when the world is ending, you discover that the storm wasn't destroying your life. It was delivering your future. Marcus Kane had spent 6 years waiting to die. Rachel Morrison had spent 8 months fighting to survive. 4 children had been caught between grief and hope, unsure which would win. And then a hurricane named Elise changed everything. Because that's what storms do. They destroy what's weak and expose what's strong. They tear down what was never meant to last and reveal foundations sturdy enough to rebuild on. They test every structure, every bond, every promise, until only truth remains. The truth was simple. They needed each other. Not because they were broken, but because they were healing. Not because they were desperate, but because they were brave enough to choose love even when it looked impossible. Rachel leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder.
Thank you for opening the door.
Thank you for knocking, he replied. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make and kids to get ready for school and appointments with therapists and lawyers still cleaning up the Morrison family's legal wreckage. There would be ordinary days and challenging moments, and the beautiful, exhausting work of raising 4 children while 2 adults learned how to be partners. But tonight, there was just this, a family together. Save, loved, home. And that was more than either of them had dared to hope for when Hurricane Elise had raged, and a desperate woman had pounded on a stranger's door, and a Marine had decided that maybe, just maybe, survival wasn't enough, that living was worth the risk. The lighthouse beams swept the darkness, faithful and constant, a promise that even in the worst storms, light still finds its way home.